Laerdal Medicals may be most known for making CPR mannequins, Annie mannequins, and we have the mission of help saving lives. And in 2010, Laerdal Global Health was founded, which is a non-for-profit company working in low resource settings with the mission of helping mothers and babies survive their birthday. Yes. No. Is this working when I have the other computer?
No, it's not on your computer.
Yes. So, can everyone guess what this map is showing? Yeah, well, it's the birth, where the births are happening in the world. But this one, oh, is this the same? This one. This is the neonatal mortality. Sorry?
Is that intensity enough? Is the darker color meaning it's more?
Oh, it's bigger. So you see the Africa and India and Pakistan is really big, and Europe and North America is very small.
Okay, I'm guessing.
Yeah. So most of the birth, of course, happening in Asia and Africa where there are more people, but even more are dying there. Yes. And if we look at, oh, sorry. Because every year there's 1.5 million neonatal deaths, and about a quarter of these are interpartum related. We have 2.6 million stillborns, and 40% of these are fresh stillborn, which means they were alive when the labor started. This means that we have around 1.6 million intrapartum related deaths each year. That means that the next 20 minutes, 60 babies will die because of something happening during labor, which could have been avoided or corrected if it was detected early enough. And this map, what is this showing? Sorry? No. This is showing the global distribution of surgeons, of anesthesiologists, obstetricians, and the maps doesn't match. Where the burden is not where the resources are. And this is what we are all trying to prevent in this room. That a lifeless baby is entering the world. If he's lucky and has been detected early enough, he might just need some start help by resuscitation or stimulation. But if not, he will become one of the 1.6 million that die every year because of something happening during birth. And in our settings, we are often at least close to maybe 1 midwife per laboring mother or per 2 laboring mothers. But in these settings, you are maybe 4 health workers in a labor ward with 12 beds, 2 or 3 women in each bed, maybe someone at the floor as well. And even if the health workers are working as heroes, doing a phenomenal job, they don't have a chance to look after each woman, to detect every baby that needs attention. And me and Jarle and Sarah, who's up there, we have been part of a project called Safer Birth. It's a collaboration between Laerdal Global Health, the hospital and the university in Stavanger, and 3 hospitals in Tanzania. It was a big project, 5 years, with involving 100 people, 11 PhD students, many of them Tanzanian, and a budget of 100 million NOK, which is a bit more than 10 million euros. The point of the project was to develop products to reduce the workload of the midwives in these settings, and to also provide data for research from these devices. And this is the product that has been developed: Moyo, fetal heart rate monitor; Neobeat, neonatal, or a monitor for newborn heart rate monitor; Upright with PEEP, it's a new resuscitation bag; and neonatally live resuscitation training system. And I will spend the rest of my time mostly on Moyo, the fetal heart rate monitor. First, some background. It has been developed with a close collaboration with the midwives and doctors in Tanzania. We went there for talking to them, and they were also invited to Stavanger, some of them. We had a lot of meetings and a lot of iterations until Moyo was ready. And Moyo, it's actually Swahili and means life or heart. And it's a kind of a handheld Doppler with a Doppler CTG probe. So it can be used both intermittently and continuously. There's been a lot of studies, both comparing Moyo to Pinard and handheld Doppler, and also qualitative studies, looking at the midwives and the mother's perspective on the device. And this is from a pre and post study at Temeke. Before Moyo was introduced, they had no fetal heart rate measurement in about or close to 50% of the labors. And after they got Moyo, this was reduced to 2%. And me and Jarle and Sarah has worked mostly with the signal data from Moyo the last year. And this is our data set. We have 3,700 labors with both fetal heart rate or continuous fetal heart rate measurement, and also about 150 parameters which describes the maternal and baby's conditions and actions taken during labor, the delivery mode, and etc. We were able. It's 3 different. Oh, sorry. It's 3 different hospitals in Tanzania, and we were able to match about half of the labors where we know that they use Moyo, a bit depending on sites, from 45% to 58%. And yeah, the main difficulties with matching the data was, a lot of the episodes were missing. We couldn't find them. They were never uploaded to the server. And there was also contradicting time stamps. For instance, that the baby was said that it was admitted after it was born, but it has been used Moyo. And yeah. So we were able to clean up and sort some of it, but not all of it. We wanted to look at how because Moyo comes with an alarm feature, and we wanted to evaluate how that alarm was performing. So we divided the labours in groups, dependent on the outcome. So this red one is the sick babies, which include all the fresh stillborn, all the ones that died after the 30 minutes or were dead after 30 minutes, and all the ones that have been bed mask ventilated. And the sick group, the most healthy group, they had normal outcome after both 30 minutes and 24 hours after birth, and they were not resuscitated by any means. No bed mask ventilation, no suction, no stimulation. And they had an APSCAR score of at least 9. And they were born vaginally. And then the rest I divided into groups depending on APGAR score. So the biggest part is where APGAR score is more equal or bigger than 8, both at 1 minute and 5 minutes, and the other one is where one of them are less than 8. And then we can see how the midwives perform. So the red one is still the sick, the green one here is the healthy ones, and these are the two in the middle with the APGAR score greater than 8 and less than 8. So the midwives were able to detect about 30% of the sick babies, and they detected, when I say detected, it means that in the data it says that they had an abnormal heart rate at one point during labor. So 6% of the healthy ones did, and 31% of the sick ones did. Moyo gave an alarm in 25% of the sick ones and 14% of the healthy ones. And of course we are not happy with that. We wanted to increase that, the detection rate. And also what is it telling us is that the midwives are not basing their whole evaluation on the Moyo alarm alone. And this figure is showing every labor that has an abnormal heart rate detected by the midwives, and every labor which had a Moyo alarm, fetal heart rate alarm. And the overlap is quite small. But we wanted to see if we can improve the alarm algorithm. So this is from the previous figure, the midwife and the Moyo alarm. And we first tried to just see if we could do something with because the alarm on Moyo is it's only if the number has been outside the normal limit for a certain amount of time, and the normal limit is 110 to 160. So if it has been outside of this limit for extended time, then the alarm starts beeping. And we try to adjust the counters, so when to reset the counter for how long it should be outside. And we can improve the detection of the sick ones, but as you all know, that's not the problem. The problem is to also keep the healthy ones low. And we also try to use baseline instead of only the number. And we've been in contact with Antonia at Oxford, looking at how Oxys 1.5 is doing in our data. So it's improving the sick, and it's not detecting as many healthy. But as Antonio told you, it's the Haukås is also basing its evaluation also on some risk factors, which we have not included in Moyo. We don't have any possibility to include in Moyo yet. So I also take one without any risk factors. And you can see the performance there. But in the future, of course, we can imagine that we can use an app or similar to include the risk factors to adjust the thresholds of the alarm based on the risk factors. So to conclude on this, we would like to help the midwife to detect more than 1/3 of the babies that needs help. And one way of doing it is improving the alarm, for instance by Haukås or some other algorithm. We have also thought about including a scalp stimulus test to help differentiate if it's a sick or a healthy baby when the alarm is there. And a third thing is it's training in labor management for the midwife. If we could tailor the training to close clinical gaps, but to be able to do that, we need to understand what is happening during labor. When we worked with the safer birth data, we had a lot of additional data to the fetal heart rate, but we also became aware of what we missed. We didn't have so many timestamp data, so we were not able to see how things influence the fetal heart rate. For instance, how is intrauterine resuscitation? What effect does it have on the fetal heart rate? And when is the decision for a C-section made by the midwife? And how long take it until the baby gets a C-section, for instance? And we want to collect more data on this to be able to tailor the training to close the gaps between the clinical, what they do in reality and what has been shown to work or what the guidelines says, or and that's what we try to do now, because even if the Safer Birth project is finished, all the products will be used both in the hospitals in Stavanger, but also there's a project called Sustain in Nepal, founded by the Grand Challenge of Canada, which is implementing these products in 9 hospitals in Nepal. And also newly, there was a Safer Birth extension project founded by GFF to implement them in 30 hospitals in Tanzania. And then we want to use our experience from the Safer Birth project to make sure we collect data that is useful for the research and also make the data collection easier. Yes. And we shouldn't forget why we're here. It's to make it a happy birthday for as many babies as possible. Yes. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Solveig. So any questions, comments, thoughts? Just a bit distracted.
Thank you. Hey, it's a wonderful talk and a heroic effort to make a difference where it's probably needed the most. Do you have data on the effect of introduction of the Moyo and the outcomes like mortality, morbidity?
No, it was not enough enough data to see any difference on the mortality. Yeah.
I'm sure it'll come.
Yeah, many congratulations to the team who developed Moyo. And when I was working for the International Federation of Obstetrics and Gynecology, we were looking at essential devices for low resource countries, and we recommended Moyo, and there was another one, I think at the time was commercialized by Philips, who was an intermittent auscultation with the winding device. So I think it's really important to go in that direction. But I think it's just to reinforce your final conclusion that it's really not just the monitoring that counts, and this is true for both low resource and high resource countries, because you can get a lot of alarms, you can get a lot of abnormal CTGs, but it's the way clinicians react to it, the way midwives react to it, that may make the difference or not. And from what I heard in some of the travels to Africa is that in many places you decide a cesarean section, but then you're left outside the operating theatre for many hours because there are many others who have been decided before. And clinicians are operating all the time. So it's really difficult to show even such, what seems to be such a useful device that actually makes a difference to mortality and morbidity. So it's really difficult.
Yes.
Next step.
One last comment that relates to the question is, if you have a device and if you believe that it's going to affect perinatal mortality, the question is, do you have the downstream resources to act on what it is you collect? And if we know one thing for sure about fetal heart rate monitoring and its clinical utility, it's not that it decreases any mortalities, but it increases the cesarean section rate. So if a healthcare organization is going to go forward with intensive, very good fetal monitoring, they have to be prepared to to fix the downstream consequences of what they do. Because if you don't, then you just change the causes of the mortality and you will demoralize the medical staff. However, I am a believer that it's better to light one light than to damn the darkness.
Yes, a very interesting work. Yes. What were the resources that you depended on in terms of power for the devices or for your servers? Or you mentioned that you had some inconsistencies in the data. Did you need an electricity grid functioning, perhaps? For example, were the devices battery operated?
Yes. Moyo has a battery lifetime of about 20 hours or something, and we never heard, or at these sites they had plenty of Moyos because of the research project. So we never heard that was a problem. If it ran out of battery, they just used another one. So we didn't miss much data because of that. It was more that they weren't structured and we hadn't taught them to be structured and how to download data frequently and then upload it to the server. So it was more.
So the server needed the power grid, clearly.
Yes.
Can I just mention that the person who analyzed this data, and of course I didn't know what to expect on here, data different device, Solveig knows. It was impressive, it was a very good quality. I wouldn't make the difference between our CPGs and their data. If you gave them to me like this, I wouldn't make the difference. So neither in terms of to really good quality and a surprising, very impressive quality.
It's very important work, but when you quote the horrible statistics of death from around the world, those statistics come from places where the real figures are not known, and they're estimates derived from samples of very small proportions of the total data. So in terms of the labor-related deaths, do we know, or the stillbirths, do we know how many of those women actually delivered under care or not? Was there any option to monitor the fetal heart rate in any way? Do we know whether they were being delivered at home, or do we know that the simple features of antenatal care were being provided, and these deaths were despite those features, or because the basics weren't provided? That's my first comment and question. The second is there any capacity to record the signal that you get on Moyo, or has it vanished as soon as it's taken? It's not archived in any possible way.
I can take the last first because that's the easiest. So it's recorded on the device. For now, it's recorded only on the device, and you can by an USB plug take it out. Yeah. And the first one, of course, these are mostly estimates, I guess, made by UNICEF, and I also know, or we have seen, because of the other product, the Neobit, that many of the stillborn are misclassified. They have life when they come out. They haven't died during or inside the abdomen. Yes.
So the problem is we don't know. There's a shortage of basic information. And secondly, we don't know how much is truly preventable by monitoring of the intrapartum type as opposed to just providing basic care. Is that right?
Possibly.
I think Maria had a question, or any others? Last one? Maria, did you have a question?